One act of kindness. That's all it took for Aaron Scott to go from being a model employee to facing criticism at the Majestic Tower Hotel. His kindness to an elderly guest begins a series of events that will change his job forever. What happens when a young man's bravery clashes with office politics? If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey. Aaron Scott's day at the Majestic Tower usually started with a crisp uniform and a warm smile. For 10 years, he had been the go-to guy in the concierge department, known for his attention to detail and strict adherence to company rules. His colleagues admired him, often seeking his advice on tricky guest situations. But beneath the surface of workplace camaraderie, Aaron faced subtle challenges. As a black man in a corporate environment, he couldn't help but notice how promotions seemed to pass him by, despite his decade of dedicated service. Still, he took pride in his work, pouring his heart into every task. On this particular day, as Aaron stood at his post, his keen eyes spotted an elderly guest entering the lobby. Little did he know, this moment would be the turning point in his career at the Majestic Tower. As the elderly guest stumbled into view, Aaron's instincts kicked in. But could his act of kindness lead to unexpected consequences? What if helping someone in need wasn't as straightforward as it seemed? Aaron Scott stood at his post in the gleaming lobby of the Majestic Tower, his eyes scanning the area with practiced ease. He took pride in his appearance, his uniform crisp and his smile warm, ready to assist any guest who might need his help. Over the years, Aaron had become more than just a concierge. He was a friend to every employee and guest he encountered. His dedication to his work was evident in the numerous certifications he had obtained, despite his position in the company. First aid and CPR, hospitality management, customer service, fire safety, and emergency procedures. Aaron had them all. He believed in being prepared for any situation that might arise in the fast-paced world of luxury hospitality. As the afternoon sun streamed through the lobby's grand windows, Aaron noticed an elderly man enter. The gentleman's steps were unsteady, his face pale and drawn. In a matter of seconds, the man stumbled, his legs giving way beneath him. The lobby erupted in gasps and murmurs as guests and employees alike froze, unsure of how to react. But not Aaron. Without hesitation, he sprang into action, his first aid training kicking in as he rushed to the fallen guest's side. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked, kneeling beside the elderly man. The guest's eyes were unfocused, his breathing labored. Aaron quickly assessed the situation, noting the man's weakened state. I haven't eaten," the gentleman whispered, his voice barely audible above the commotion in the lobby. Understanding dawned on Aaron. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the energy bar he kept for his own lunch break. "Here, sir, please eat this," he urged, unwrapping the bar and helping the man take a small bite. As the elderly guest slowly regained his strength, Aaron called for emergency services, his voice calm and authoritative. The other employees, shaken out of their initial shock, began to assist, bringing water and helping to clear space around the fallen guest. The atmosphere in the lobby shifted dramatically. What had begun as a moment of fear and uncertainty transformed into a display of compassion and unity. Guests who had been mere observers moments before now offered words of encouragement and support. As the paramedics arrived to take over, the elderly man grasped Aaron's hand. "Thank you, young man," he said, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "You may have saved my life today." The lobby erupted in applause, the tension of the moment giving way to relief and admiration. Aaron, usually composed and professional, felt a lump form in his throat. This wasn't about following protocol or adhering to company rules. This was about human kindness, about doing what was right. As the paramedics wheeled the elderly guest away, promising to take good care of him, Aaron found himself surrounded by guests and colleagues, all eager to commend his quick thinking and compassion. "That was incredible, Aaron," one of his fellow concierges said, clapping him on the back. "You really went above and beyond." Aaron smiled, but inside, he felt a mix of emotions. Pride in his actions, certainly, but also a nagging worry. He had acted on instinct, doing what he believed was right. But in the world of corporate hospitality, things weren't always so simple. As he returned to his post, Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that this incident might have repercussions he couldn't foresee. He had broken protocol by directly interacting with a guest in distress, by offering his own food. In the past, such actions had been frowned upon by management, seen as overstepping boundaries. Aaron's unease proved prophetic. As he stepped into his manager's office, the air grew thick with tension. What hidden policies could turn a heroic act into a fireable offense? And how would Aaron navigate the treacherous waters between compassion and company rules? The door closed behind Aaron with a soft click, sealing him in the plush office of Mr. Daniels, the hotel manager. The room, with its mahogany desk and leather chairs, suddenly felt oppressive. Aaron stood, his hands clasped behind his back, as Mr. Daniels regarded him with an unreadable expression. "Take a seat, Aaron," Mr. Daniels said, his voice carrying a hint of disapproval. Aaron complied, his stomach nodding with each passing second. Mr. Daniels leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished surface of his desk. "I've called you in regarding the incident in the lobby earlier today. While your intentions were admirable, I'm afraid your actions have put us in a difficult position." Aaron blinked, confusion etching across his face. "Sir, I don't understand. The guest was in distress. I was just trying to help." "I appreciate that, Aaron, but you must understand. We have protocols in place for a reason. By directly interacting with a guest in distress and offering your personal food, you've overstepped your boundaries as an employee." The words hit Aaron like a physical blow. He struggled to process the absurdity of the situation. "But sir, the man could have been seriously hurt if I hadn't intervened. Surely our primary concern should be the well-being of our guests?" Mr. Daniels sighed, a note of frustration creeping into his voice. "It's not that simple, Aaron. We have liability concerns to consider. What if the food you gave him had caused an allergic reaction? What if your attempts to help had inadvertently caused injury?" Aaron felt a surge of indignation. "With all due respect, sir, I'm certified in first aid and CPR. I assessed the situation before taking action. The guest himself thanked me for potentially saving his life." The manager's expression hardened. "That may be so, but it doesn't change the fact that you violated our unwritten policy on employee-guest interactions. We can't have staff members taking matters into their own hands, regardless of their intentions." As Mr. Daniels continued to speak, Aaron couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this reprimand than met the eye. Was it possible that his race played a role in how his actions were being perceived? He'd noticed subtle instances of bias before, but had always pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on his work. "Furthermore, Aaron, your actions today have set a precedent that we simply can't allow. What if every employee decided to ignore protocol when they felt it was justified? It would lead to chaos." Aaron felt a mix of emotions swirling within him: anger, hurt, and a growing sense of injustice. He thought about his years of dedicated service, the extra certifications he'd pursued, the countless times he'd gone above and beyond for the hotel and its guests. And now, here he was, being reprimanded for an act of basic human kindness. "I understand your position, sir," Aaron said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "But I can't apologize for helping someone in need. If that goes against hotel policy, then perhaps it's the policy that needs to be reconsidered." Mr. Daniels's eyes narrowed, That's not your decision to make, Aaron. I hope you understand the seriousness of this situation. We'll need to discuss potential consequences for your actions. For now, you're dismissed. Aaron stood, his legs feeling unsteady beneath him. As he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was a turning point, not just for him, but potentially for the entire hotel. He left the office, his mind racing with questions and a growing determination to address the underlying issues that had led to this moment. Aaron's suspension wasn't just about one incident. It was the culmination of a pattern he'd tried to ignore. But now, as he faced a month without work, a startling question emerged. What if his greatest professional mistake was staying silent all along? The weight of the disciplinary action hung heavy on Aaron's shoulders as he left the manager's office. A month's suspension felt like an eternity, especially for someone who had poured his heart and soul into his job for a decade. He replayed the conversation in his mind, each word from Mr. Daniels cutting deeper than the last. Aaron, we've noticed a series of infractions over the past few months, Mr. Daniels had said, his voice cold and detached. The incident with the elderly guest was simply the final straw. We can't have employees who consistently disregard our policies, no matter how well-intentioned they may be. As Aaron walked through the hotel's opulent lobby, the irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. The very qualities that made him an exceptional employee, his compassion, his quick thinking, his willingness to go above and beyond, were now being used against him. He felt a mix of anger and disbelief bubbling up inside him. Outside, the bustling city streets seemed oblivious to his inner turmoil. Aaron found himself wandering, his feet carrying him to a nearby park. As he sat on a bench, the events of the past few years began to replay in his mind, but this time he saw them through a different lens. He remembered the time when a young black family had complained about poor service, only to be dismissed by management. He recalled instances where his suggestions for improving guest experiences were overlooked while similar ideas from his white colleagues were praised and implemented. Even his own career progression seemed to have stalled, despite his dedication and additional certifications. How could I have been so blind? Aaron muttered to himself, the realization hitting him like a ton of bricks. He had always prided himself on his professionalism, on rising above petty office politics. But now, he wondered if that very attitude had allowed systemic issues to fester unchallenged. As the afternoon wore on, Aaron's phone buzzed with messages from concerned coworkers. Word of his suspension had spread quickly, and many were shocked and confused. One message in particular caught his attention. Aaron, what happened was wrong. You're not alone. Many of us have faced similar treatment. Maybe it's time we did something about it. The message sparked something in Aaron. He began to see his suspension not as an ending, but as a potential beginning. Perhaps this was the push he needed to address the underlying issues that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. Just as Aaron was contemplating his next move, his phone rang. It was the front desk at the Majestic Tower. Aaron, there's a group of people here asking for you. One of them is the elderly gentleman you helped. They seem pretty upset about your suspension. Aaron's heart raced as he hurried back to the hotel. As he approached the lobby, he saw a small crowd gathered around the reception desk. At the center stood the elderly man he had helped, flanked by several authoritative-looking individuals. "Where is Aaron Scott?" one of them demanded, his voice carrying across the lobby. "We want to know why he's been punished for saving a life." The hotel staff looked flustered, clearly unprepared for this confrontation. Aaron hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. "I'm Aaron Scott," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The elderly man's face lit up with recognition. "Young man, "I owe you my life," he said, reaching out to shake Aaron's hand. "When I heard what happened to you because of your kindness, I couldn't stand by and do nothing." As Aaron listened to the group advocate on his behalf, challenging the hotel's policies and demanding justice, he felt a strange mix of gratitude and unease. This unexpected support was touching, but it also highlighted the broader issues at play. It wasn't just about one incident or one employee. It was about a system that prioritized rigid rules over human compassion, that allowed subtle biases to influence decisions. The elderly man's identity revealed a twist that would change everything. Who was Isaac Coleman, and how would his connection to United Hands organization reshape Aaron's fight against workplace injustice? As Aaron stood in the lobby, surrounded by the unexpected group of advocates, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to take a dramatic turn. The elderly gentleman he had helped stepped forward, extending his hand once more. "Aaron, I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Isaac Coleman, president of United Hands organization. We're an advocacy group that focuses on workplace equality and justice." Aaron's eyes widened in recognition. United Hands was well known for its work in exposing corporate malpractice and fighting for workers' rights. He shook Isaac's hand, his mind racing with the implications of this revelation. Isaac's face grew serious as he continued. "When I heard about your suspension, I knew we had to act. What you did wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a stand against a system that values rigid rules over human compassion." The hotel staff looked increasingly uncomfortable as the confrontation unfolded in the lobby. Mr. Daniels emerged from his office, his face a mask of forced politeness as he approached the group. "Mr. Coleman, I assure you there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this in private." Isaac's response was firm. "There's nothing to misunderstand, Mr. Daniels. Your employee saved my life, and you punished him for it. That's not just wrong. It's a clear indicator of deeper issues within your organization." As the tension in the lobby grew, Aaron found himself at a crossroads. He had always prided himself on being a model employee, on following the rules and keeping his head down. But now, faced with the injustice of his suspension and the unexpected support of Isaac Coleman, he realized that staying silent was no longer an option. "Mr. Coleman," Aaron said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I appreciate your support. But this isn't just about me. There are systemic issues at play here that affect many of my colleagues." Isaac nodded, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. "That's exactly why we're here, Aaron. Would you be willing to come to our office? I think we have a lot to discuss." As Aaron left the hotel with Isaac and his team, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. He was stepping into unknown territory, but he knew it was necessary. At the United Hands office, Aaron found himself surrounded by a team of dedicated advocates. The walls were adorned with posters showcasing past victories and ongoing campaigns. It was a far cry from the polished luxury of the Majestic Tower, but there was an energy here that felt more authentic, more purposeful. Isaac sat across from Aaron, his expression serious. "Tell us everything, Aaron. Not just about your suspension, but about the patterns you've observed, the subtle biases, the overlooked incidents." As Aaron began to speak, he felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. For years, he had pushed aside his concerns, convincing himself that staying professional meant staying silent. But now, as he recounted incident after incident, he realized the true cost of that silence. "It's not just about race," Aaron explained, his voice growing more confident. "It's about a system that values conformity over compassion, that punishes initiative and rewards blind obedience. And I'm not the only one affected. Many of my colleagues face similar treatment, but they're afraid to speak up." Isaac leaned forward, his eyes bright with determination. "Aaron, what you're describing is exactly the kind of systemic discrimination we fight against. But to make real change, we need more than just your story. We need to show that this is a widespread issue." Aaron nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "I think I know how we can do that. Many of my coworkers have reached out expressing their support and sharing their own experiences. If we can bring them together, document their stories, we could build a case," Isaac finished, nodding approvingly. "Not just against the Majestic Tower, but against the entire system that allows these practices to continue." As the meeting continued, Aaron felt a transformation taking place within him. He was no longer just a hotel employee fighting for his job. He was becoming an advocate, a voice for those who had been silenced for too long. The team at United Hands worked with Aaron to develop a strategy. They would start by gathering testimonies from other employees, documenting patterns of discrimination and unfair treatment. Then they would present their findings to the hotel's board of directors, along with a set of demands for policy changes and accountability measures. The hotel's pristine facade masked years of injustice. Now, as Aaron and his coworkers gathered in secret, tension filled the air. Would their collective voice be enough to shatter the system, or would fear keep them trapped in silence? Aaron stood at the front of the cramped conference room, his heart racing as he surveyed the faces of his colleagues. The space, borrowed from United Hands organization, felt a world away from the polished luxury of the Majestic Tower. Yet, it was here that the seeds of change would be planted. "Thank you all for coming," Aaron began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I know many of you are taking a risk just by being here." Isaac Coleman, seated nearby, nodded encouragingly. The room was filled with a mix of emotions: nervousness, hope, and a simmering anger that had long been suppressed. As Aaron recounted his experience and the events that led to his suspension, murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Slowly, others began to share their own stories. Maria, a housekeeper, spoke of being passed over for promotions despite her years of service. James, a bellhop, described the subtle discrimination he faced from certain guests, with management turning a blind eye. Each story added another piece to the puzzle, revealing a pattern of systemic issues that ran deep within the Majestic Tower. "We're not here to complain," Aaron said, his voice gaining strength. "We're here to make a change, but to do that, we need to stand together." Isaac stepped forward, his presence adding weight to Aaron's words. "What you're doing takes courage," he said. "But remember, you're not alone. United Hands is here to support you every step of the way." As the meeting progressed, the group began to formulate their demands. Clear anti-discrimination policies topped the list, followed by fair treatment and equal opportunities for advancement. They discussed the need for diversity training, transparent reporting mechanisms for grievances, and regular audits to ensure compliance. "These aren't just requests," Aaron emphasized. "They're necessary steps to create a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected." The energy in the room shifted as the group realized the power of their collective voice. What had started as individual grievances was transforming into a unified movement for change. As they finalized their list of demands, a tense silence fell over the room. The next step, confronting management, loomed large in everyone's minds. "I know you're scared," Aaron said, addressing the unspoken fear. "I am too, but if we don't speak up now, nothing will change. We owe it to ourselves and to future employees to take this stand." Isaac nodded in agreement. "Remember, you have legal protections. Retaliation against employees for organizing is illegal. We'll be there to support you every step of the way." The group decided to elect representatives to present their case to management. Aaron, with his years of service and articulate manner, was the unanimous choice to lead the delegation. As the meeting drew to a close, a mix of determination and apprehension filled the air. They had taken the first step, but the hardest part was yet to come. As the elevator ascended to the top floor, Aaron's heart raced. He knew that behind those polished oak doors, a battle for justice awaited. But what he couldn't predict was how this confrontation would reshape not just the Majestic Tower, but the entire hospitality industry. Aaron stood in the hallway outside the executive boardroom, flanked by his colleagues and supporters. The air felt thick with anticipation. He glanced at Isaac Coleman, who gave him a reassuring nod. Taking a deep breath, Aaron pushed open the heavy doors. The boardroom was imposing, with its high ceilings and walls lined with portraits of past executives. At the far end of a long mahogany table sat Mr. Daniels, flanked by other members of upper management. Their faces were a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. "Mr. Scott," Mr. Daniels began, his tone dismissive, "I hope you realize the gravity of your actions. Organizing employees without proper channels is a serious offense." Aaron stepped forward, his voice steady despite his nerves. "With all due respect, Mr. Daniels, we're here because the proper channels have failed us. We have documented evidence of systemic discrimination and unfair practices within the Majestic Tower." As Aaron began to present their case, laying out incident after incident, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The initial smugness on the executives' faces gave way to concern, then alarm. They exchanged worried glances as Aaron eloquently articulated the experiences of marginalized employees, backed by data and testimonies. Isaac Coleman stepped in, his presence adding weight to their cause. "Gentlemen, what you're hearing isn't just a list of grievances. It's a call for change, one that's long overdue in the hospitality industry." Mr. Daniels leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "And what exactly are you proposing?" Aaron produced a document outlining their demands. "We're calling for comprehensive anti-discrimination policies, transparent reporting mechanisms, and regular audits to ensure compliance. We want diversity training for all staff, from the housekeeping department to this very boardroom." As he spoke, the door opened, and a group of unexpected allies entered. Representatives from the Department of Labor, labor lawyers, and members of human rights organizations filed in, followed by a small contingent of journalists. The executives' faces paled. What had started as an internal matter was now a public issue, with potential legal and PR ramifications. One of the labor lawyers stepped forward. "Gentlemen, we've reviewed the evidence presented by Mr. Scott and his colleagues. The patterns of discrimination are clear and actionable. We're here to ensure that the Majestic Tower takes immediate and concrete steps to address these issues." The tension in the room was palpable. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by a nervous energy. We had no idea the situation was this serious. Of course, we take these allegations very seriously." Aaron seized the moment. "This isn't about allegations, Mr. Daniels. It's about acknowledging the experiences of your employees and committing to real change. We're not here to tear down the Majestic Tower. We want to make it a place where everyone, regardless of their background, can thrive." As the meeting progressed, the dynamic shifted. What had started as a confrontation evolved into a negotiation. The executives, faced with the weight of evidence and the presence of external stakeholders, began to engage more constructively. Hours passed as they hammered out the details of new policies and initiatives. Aaron and his colleagues stood firm, refusing to accept token gestures or vague promises. They insisted on concrete timelines, measurable goals, and mechanisms for accountability. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the boardroom, a tentative agreement was reached. The Majestic Tower would implement a comprehensive anti-discrimination policy, conduct regular audits, and establish a diverse committee to oversee its implementation. Aaron felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration as he left the boardroom. They had taken a stand, and management had listened. But he knew this was just the beginning. The real work of transforming the Majestic Tower into a truly inclusive workplace was yet to come. As the boardroom doors closed behind Aaron, a wave of relief washed over him. But little did he know, this was just the beginning of a transformation that would reshape the Majestic Tower from the ground up. The ink on the agreement was barely dry, but already tremors of change were rumbling through the hotel. What unexpected consequences would Aaron's stand unleash, and how would it transform the lives of those who worked there? The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of activity. Mr. Daniels, the manager who had suspended Aaron, was swiftly removed from his position. Several members of upper management faced disciplinary action for their role in perpetuating discriminatory practices. The old guard was being dismantled, making way for a new era of leadership at the Majestic Tower. As news of the changes spread, a palpable shift in atmosphere swept through the hotel. Employees who had long felt overlooked or marginalized began to stand a little taller, speak a little louder. The fear that had kept many silent for years began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. The new management team, handpicked for their commitment to inclusivity and fairness, wasted no time in implementing the agreed-upon changes. Anti-discrimination training became mandatory for all staff, from the housekeeping department to the executive suite. The sessions were eye-opening for many, sparking conversations that had long been avoided. Aaron, once suspended for his act of kindness, now found himself at the center of these transformative efforts. His experiences and insights were sought after, his voice respected in discussions about employee relations and diversity initiatives. It was a stark contrast to the way things had been just weeks before. One afternoon, as Aaron walked through the lobby, he overheard a conversation between two bellhops. "Can you believe it?" one said. "I actually feel like I have a shot at that supervisor position now. Before, I wouldn't have even bothered applying." These small moments of hope and empowerment began to accumulate, creating a ripple effect throughout the hotel. The once rigid hierarchy began to soften, with communication flowing more freely between departments. Employees from diverse backgrounds found themselves working together on projects, their unique perspectives valued and incorporated. The physical space of the Majestic Tower began to reflect these changes as well. The portraits of past executives that had lined the boardroom walls were replaced with artwork celebrating diversity and inclusion. The employee break room, once a drab afterthought, was renovated to create a more welcoming and comfortable space for staff. But perhaps the most significant change was in the way guests were treated. With employees feeling more valued and respected, their interactions with guests became warmer, more genuine. The stiff formality that had once defined the Majestic Tower's service began to give way to a more personalized, empathetic approach. One evening, Aaron overheard an elderly guest praising a young bellhop for going above and beyond to help her. The scene brought a smile to his face, reminding him of the incident that had set this whole chain of events in motion. As word of the Majestic Tower's transformation spread, it began to attract attention beyond its walls. Other hotels in the area took notice, some with curiosity, others with apprehension. Industry publications began to run stories about the hotel's innovative approach to workplace culture. Aaron found himself invited to speak at hospitality conferences, sharing the story of how one act of kindness had sparked a movement for change. His message resonated with many, inspiring other employees to stand up for what's right in their own workplaces. The impact of these changes extended beyond just the employees. The Majestic Tower's reputation began to shift. Guests who had once chosen the hotel solely for its luxury amenities now praised its warm, inclusive atmosphere. Reviews mentioned not just the plush beds and gourmet restaurants, but the genuine care and respect shown by staff. As Aaron reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The road hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges to overcome. Old habits died hard, and not everyone had embraced the changes with open arms. But the progress was undeniable. The ripples of change at the Majestic Tower were about to become a tidal wave. As word of their transformation spread, a question lingered in the air. How far could the impact of one man's courage reach? News of the Majestic Tower's revolutionary policies traveled fast in the hospitality industry. Other hotels in the area took notice, some with curiosity, others with apprehension. The once rigid world of luxury accommodations was being shaken to its core by the story of a concierge who dared to challenge the status quo. Aaron found himself at the center of this growing movement. He was invited to speak at industry events, sharing his experiences and advocating for systemic changes in workplace culture. At one such conference, he stood before a room full of hotel executives and managers, his voice steady as he recounted his journey. "It wasn't just about me," Aaron explained. "It was about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected, where kindness isn't punished but celebrated." His words resonated with many in the audience. Some nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Aaron's story was forcing them to confront the uncomfortable truths about their own establishments. As he spoke, Aaron couldn't help but think of Isaac Coleman and the crucial role he played in this transformation. "Without Mr. Coleman and the United Hands organization, we might never have found the courage to fight for justice," he admitted. "Their support gave us the strength to stand up and make our voices heard." The impact of Aaron's actions extended far beyond the conference halls. Hotels across the city began to reevaluate their policies and practices. Some embraced change willingly, eager to create a more inclusive work environment. Others resisted, clinging to outdated hierarchies and discriminatory practices. But the tide of change was unstoppable. Employees in other hotels, inspired by the Majestic Tower's example, began to speak up about their own experiences of discrimination and unfair treatment. They organized, formed committees, and demanded better working conditions. One evening, as Aaron was leaving a speaking engagement, he was approached by a young woman. Her eyes shone with determination as she introduced herself as a housekeeper from a rival hotel. "Your story gave me the courage to stand up to my managers," she said. "We're organizing now, just like you did. Thank you for showing us it's possible." Moments like these reminded Aaron of the true power of his actions. It wasn't just about changing one hotel. It was about sparking a movement that could transform an entire industry. As the weeks passed, the ripple effect continued to grow. The Majestic Tower's new policies began to attract a more diverse clientele. Guests who had previously felt unwelcome in luxury hotels now sought out the Majestic Tower for its inclusive atmosphere. Other businesses in the area took notice. Restaurants, shops, and even corporate offices began to implement similar anti-discrimination policies. The transformation that had begun in one hotel was now reshaping the cultural landscape of the entire city. Aaron's inbox filled with messages from people around the world who had heard his story. Some shared their own experiences of workplace discrimination, while others asked for advice on how to create change in their own communities. One day, Aaron received an unexpected call from Isaac Coleman. "Aaron, I hope you realize the full impact of what you've done," Isaac said, his voice filled with pride. "You've not only changed the Majestic Tower, but you've inspired a whole generation to stand up for what's right." As Aaron reflected on his journey, he couldn't help but feel a mix of amazement and humility. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something far beyond anything he could have imagined. It just goes to show, Aaron thought to himself. That one person's courage really can spark widespread positive change. Aaron's journey teaches us that standing up for what's right can create powerful change. His courage in the face of injustice not only transformed the Majestic Tower, but sparked a movement across the hospitality industry. It shows how one person's actions can inspire others to speak out and make a difference. Think about your own workplace or community. Are there issues that need addressing? Remember, change often starts with small steps. Maybe it's speaking up in a meeting or supporting a colleague who's being treated unfairly. Every action counts. We want to hear from you. Have you ever stood up for positive change at work? Or do you have plans to make a difference in your community? Share your stories in the comments. Your experiences could inspire others to take action and create a more just and inclusive world for everyone.